Broadcasting from Millennium Student Center at the University of Missouri, St. Louis, and online at umslradio.org. We are the voice of UMSL. We are UMSL Radio.
The opinions expressed on this program are the views of the host and not necessarily the views of the University of Missouri St. Louis or this station.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special Halloween episode of That Science and Nature Show. I'm your ghost, Jeremy Howard, and joining me this week, we have Becky Hansis-O'Neill.
Hello.
And Webster Hefford.
Hi, everyone.
So we have a very fun Halloween-themed episode for you. We have some more spooky Halloween horror news of sorts, and then we have a topic of the show all about what is fear and how fear is a part of our lives, and the research about fear, which is really cool. And then, like always, we'll do Outside of Science. So our first news story this week, jumping right in, it's all about reanimating spider corpses. So this comes to us from good old NPR Science. So we have scientists that have currently been looking into dead spider bodies and dead spiders that basically when they die, they sort of curl up and I guess form sort of like a lump, like all their legs are kind of like curled inwards. So they kind of figured out if we could like reanimate this spider by injecting like air into its muscles, that we could sort of reopen the spider's legs back up and kind of use it as like a claw mechanism. So like sort of a biological device, if you will. I believe the word they use was necrobiotics. So it's a dead thing, but they can use it for like a robotic application. So I thought that was super cool, if super weird. No one here is afraid of spiders. I know Becky's not, because that would be really weird if you were. Webster, are you afraid of spiders?
Not terribly. I mean, my name is Webster, so I'm kind of obligated to like spiders.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have that much issue with spiders myself. I mean, larger ones I'm more cautious of, like the tarantulas we have in lab. I'm not, super, like, going to go out of my way, like, touch them, but they're fine. I'm going to find watching them, and I'm chilling out and hanging. But yeah, I thought that was cool that they basically found this biological application. One thing I didn't really understand, because if the article talks about this, where they're injecting the air and they kind of open the legs back up and kind of use like a claw mechanism of just how and where this would be used. Because my first thought was like, this is cool. My second thought was like, I don't understand the application of this besides like you could do it.
So I looked this up last year when this research first came out, and they were thinking that if you had really fine grabbers, and I don't know about the spiders they're using in this study, but tarantulas at least have like little hairs, kind of like gecko feet, so they can pick things up and stick to things. So they thought perhaps you could use it for making circuits and anything where you needed really fine control to grab tiny parts of things.
Okay.
Though I think that's a stretch. Like, what infrastructure do you need in like a semiconductor factory? Do you need like a little spider breeding farm in there? And like, what do you do? So I thought that was a stretch, but that was their thought.
Okay.
Yeah. A lot of it sounded a little stretchy to me in terms of having practical application. I did think it was neat, though, just the general principle. There are things in nature that we can reanimate that might be functional tools, as opposed to building more things out of plastic, building more things out of aluminum, building more things out of steel. So maybe this particular one won't have that much downstream purpose, but it might inspire other technologies to come about that are also derivative of nature rather than being derivative of totally synthetic products.
Do either of you know of other like biological necrobiotic application type things? Because off the top of my head, I can't really think of anything. I thought of octopuses at first with like the suction cups, but that's not like, animatronic or like robotic, but that's kind of where my mind was going.
Yeah, what do they call that? Biophilic design?
I think so, yeah.
Not off the top of my head. Well, except for you get weird products, like certain air ferns are actually some kind of cnidarian that have been spray painted green.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, beware of your air ferns. Make sure it's not just a animal corpse.
The cnidarians are the jellies, right? Jellyfish?
Jellies, yeah.
Okay.
And there's a whole bunch of other funny little critters.
Okay. Yes, I remember that vaguely from intro bio. I should remember my taxonomy a little bit better.
I mean, I don't know if I want to... It's like net suffering, right? If you are reanimating spiders versus building little claws, it's still probably environmentally worse, and you're hurting more things to make synthetic materials, but at the same time, there's something weird to me about raising a bunch of spiders just to kill them and make them little claws.
Yeah, that there was a little bit of ethics turmoil going on in me. I'm like, it seems mean, but if they're already dead, I guess it's like you're using it in a way that's, not just letting it decompose, but, decomposition is also a natural part of, life and the life cycle.
Well, they wear out and they put new spiders on, so they unalive the spiders.
Okay.
Specifically for this.
Gotcha. Yeah, I feel like if this were another animal, we would be like, oh my God, that's so horrifying.
Yeah, a puppy grabber.
Oh my God. Right, there'd be riots in the streets if that happened. All right, so that's all spider claw stuff. So now we're on to our second news topic today. And this comes to I can never say this fairly. This comes to us from Atlas Obscura, which is kind of more of a travel/cultural science website. But they had a cool science Halloween article that's called A Haunted Chamber, a Quivering Blade, and Other Spooky Science Experiments. Basically, scientists are looking into if infrasound, electromagnetic blips, gas leaks, or even mold could just be giving us the creeps. So this article has 2 experiments they talked about. That the first one, a group of researchers basically they basically made a haunted house room, which first and foremost, that's super cool. I want to be part of that study we designed. We were going to create a haunted house room in an area that didn't actually have anything haunted about it. So nobody died. There wasn't an insane asylum there. Nothing sort of stereotypical like that. And what they did was they designed the room to make it look haunted, and they basically put different levels of electromagnetism or infrasound, different wavelengths and frequencies and stuff in the room, and basically told participants hey, you might experience these kinds of things when you walk into the room. Kind of report your symptoms. Symptoms being things like feeling dizzy, feeling a sort of presence, if you will, that is in the room, any sort of maybe paranoia, things along those lines. And they did find a little bit of response to these sort of things that they tweaked in the room. Not everybody, but a handful of people did kind of have that sixth sense, if you will, about the room. So that was the first part of it. What do we think about that?
I'm not surprised at all that worked. Actually, I experienced the same. One of the infrasound discussions in the article mentioned how I'm not sure if it was one of the authors of the study, but somebody had observed that infrasound could cause a rod to vibrate. And I've actually observed this phenomenon in a research building here. There was a tumbling thing in the boiler room upstairs. I did a full investigation to figure out why this rod was vibrating.
P.I. Webster's on the case.
And because I turned off every machine in the room, the rod was still vibrating. I was like, there's infrasound coming from somewhere. That's got to be what's shaking this rod. It was also a rusty rod, so it could have possibly been something magnetic, but it would have had to have been a really strong magnet. So I wandered around, and sure enough, I found that this thing was shaking in the boiler room upstairs. And I know in that same room where the rod was vibrating, it felt weird in there. So I've experienced infrasound does make you feel queasy and not quite nauseous, but something else is present around you.
Okay.
That makes sense to me. Is it sort of the same feeling you get if you're in the movies and there's some really loud bass and something happening in the movie, you can feel it?
Yeah, I guess so. I probably don't go to movies often enough to answer that accurately, but
okay.
All right. And then the second article the second experiment they talked about in the article was researchers actually looking at the presence of mold potentially inducing these sort of sixth sense, there's a presence in the room, sort of feeling like there's a ghost around sensation. So they basically looked at a bunch of areas that had mold and not mold and kind of compared them and kind of looked at people's sort of neural, cognitive, and sort of emotional responses to these areas overall. And I believe the results for this were kind of mixed. So they kind of had some effects, but it wasn't very concrete. But it was one of those things where it's like, oh, that's interesting that people's ghost responses might just be responding to really moldy areas. I thought that was funny.
Did they propose a mechanism? Is the mold making people a little bit sick? Or
let's see.
Is it a hallucinogenic fungus?
I'm quoting the article now.
Okay.
While environmental factors such as toxic mold, infrasound, carbon monoxide poisoning, and electromagnetism fluctuations are tantalizingly concrete explanations for experiences, remain skeptical, blah, blah, blah. Actually, that's not the part I want. okay, there's definitely a significant difference between mold presence in haunted places versus not haunted places. So based on analyzing particulate sizes in the samples, he says we have roughly 5 to 6 times more mold spores showing up in places that are reported haunted. Okay, so there is actually, they are finding a difference. So people that find these sort of haunted locations, there seems to be more of a mold presence there.
Well,
somewhat.
Okay, so haunted places tend to be really old places.
This is true.
Really old places tend to be moldy places.
This is true.
So, it's like, okay.
If they did the comparison strictly amongst older places, then maybe that could have been
fair.
Stronger.
Yeah, I guess they'd have to grow mold in newer places, so you'd have to like build a place to just make it really moldy, and then people would go in there. I guess.
How does the research approval work for that?
That's a good question.
We made a really moldy room. We're gonna put people in it and not tell them that it's moldy.
I don't think that part can.
I know in the first experiment, the scientists said they have to tell the people like, "Hey, you will experience these things when you walk in the room." They can't just say, "You might feel a presence in the room." Describe how you're feeling like that while you're getting hit with like electromagnetic waves or whatever. So they have to be a little bit more cautious. So I think
consent is important.
Consent is absolutely important. I do wonder though if you just kind of like didn't tell them, just like, all right, walk into room A and tell me how you feel. Walk into room B and tell me how you feel. Like if you could kind of do like a, I don't know, not placebo of sorts, but like a blind experiment kind of. But I guess you'd have to, maybe you have to have them sign a waiver or whatever. Be like, you might be exposed to these things, but you won't know you're exposed to these things. What was the other thing I wanted to mention from the article? Actually, I think that was... Oh, yeah. The last thing I wanted to mention from the article was that at the very end, they mention that while there is concrete proof, they can't totally explain everything. So there's still more research to be done on why people kind of experience these phenomenons of thinking they see ghosts or thinking they're, in the presence of some other entity. I guess I feel like I should ask, because for this point in the conversation, do either of you believe in ghosts? Are you?
I do not.
Okay.
I'm not sure, because I'm never quite sure about the nature of consciousness in terms of like manipulating quantum collapse on a certain domain of space, and it's kind of like, well, what happens? What domain does my consciousness occupy when I am no longer in this body, or like this body passes? Could I be manipulating quantum collapse on some random swath of air somewhere?
Can you explain quantum collapse to me? Because I don't know what that means.
So it's anything non-deterministic in this universe falls under the category of quantum collapse. It's basically you have something in quantum superposition to begin with. It's in multiple states at once. And then it probabilistically, when it's observed, it falls into one state or another. And if we have any free will whatsoever, it has to involve this phenomenon. So I'm thinking, well, I sure hope that I have some free will. And after I pass, like, what happens to that willpower? On what bit of space is it occupying? Is it still in this universe? And if it is, could I be a ghost of some sort?
Okay.
Yeah, my thought would be that it's just gone. But when you start talking about all things being possible at once and collapsing onto a particular reality, that does suggest a possibility. But I also tend to be more of a determinist, even though I hope what you're saying when I die is true. There's the yeah.
Well, we already know there are non-deterministic phenomena in our universe. Why could they not chaotic?
Wait, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt again. What is deterministic versus non-deterministic?
So deterministic means it's all predetermined. Basically, the universe is in a very precise state right now that totally predetermines what state it's going to be in tomorrow. We don't actually have any choice in the matter, even though we have this delusion of choice.
Yeah, and behavior is a funny thing to study because at its very basis with memory and how the brain works is probabilistic, right? So is that the knife to determinism all on its own before we even start talking about
I don't think that is, because at our scale we do know that things are colliding according to the laws of physics, and I think you do have to get to the quantum scale where we truly have observed non-deterministic things. I mean, yes, things are probabilistic in the brain, but that sort of probabilism is mostly due to noise, which is still deterministic.
I think of it this way. So the number of environmental factors that go into the probability of a certain set of neurons firing and producing a behavior is almost infinitely large. Like, we're assuming it's a finite system where if you knew all the inputs, you could 100% predict the behavioral output. But I think it's possible that it's so complex that we just aren't going to have that computing power to ever do anything like that.
Well, then that to me gives me hope that things happening at the quantum scale, like quantum collapses, are playing into that. And then our consciousness might actually be somewhat occupying those quantum collapses that are playing into it.
I still think, for me, I'm like, probably not. But I do hold out hope that it would be very nice if this is what was happening.
Okay. That got way more metaphysical and philosophical than I thought it was going to.
You asked a question about ghosts.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wasn't sure what the response was going to be, so I guess I'm glad I asked it. I was just going to say I believe in ghosts, largely just because I don't know if we can explain everything with science. I think there is an explanation on like what ghosts are and how they exist and stuff. We don't have it yet. And I know it's like a dangerous word for a science show. I do believe that there are ghosts.
Have either of you been on a paranormal ghost hunt?
No. Have you?
I have. I promised one of my friends that I would not be a skeptical jerk about it and went in and fully participated. We did not find any evidence.
Okay.
But she had the video cameras. She had the electromagnetic thing, thermometers, all the stuff. But nope, nothing.
Where did you guys go?
This was in an old building where multiple proprietors had reported hauntings, and other paranormal investigators, in quotes, had gone in. And then we also went in, a group of us, after with this person that had some of the equipment. Yeah. There was definitely some interesting electromagnetism going on with the meter that we had, but it was kind of weird. And in old buildings, you'll get it near like appliances and outlets. And so I imagine if someone was sensitive to that, they could totally have been feeling stuff in that building. And it was definitely going to be moldy.
Scrapes them off the wall for the sample.
But nothing exciting happened. At one point, we saw some things wiggling on the wall, and the person next to me, because there was a big group, said, "Oh, what is that?" And we turned around, and her boyfriend was moving his foot on the floor, and it was making the stuff shake. So anyway.
Nice. That's cool. That seems like it'd be kind of a fun thing to do, maybe. I feel like I would still be spooked out by being in some haunted place at night. Like, you'd kind of psych yourself up for it in a way.
Yeah, and I thought maybe that was my problem. I went in not expecting anything to happen, and then nothing happened.
Webster, have you done anything like that?
No, I've just kind of, because I know I would be too skeptical. I'd be kind of a jerk about it.
I kept my mouth shut. I wasn't a jerk. But yeah, I was very skeptical.
All right. Moving on to our last article for today. This comes to us from BBC News. So this is a little more museum-based in that the Bradford Museum in the United Kingdom is basically unveiling a haunted Halloween exhibit from its archives. So they're basically taking a bunch of old sort of prop items and other sort of dolls and those sorts of things, basically making a museum exhibit. It's the Science and Media Museum, which sounds like it's a really cool museum that I need to go visit if I ever go to the United Kingdom. So they have things like the Dracula fangs that Sir Christopher Lee wore when he performed doing Dracula. They have other like ventriloquist doll dummies, sort of like mannequins that are sort of cracked from previous like television shows and plays. They have a really cool like animatronic gorilla face that's, if you're looking at the photos on the article, basically you can see all like the sort of where like it's like bone, but it's like all metal shrapnel like on its face because it's kind of been like eroded away. So I thought this was kind of a cool thing to highlight. Have you seen in any of your, I guess, museum exhibits or, outings, like any sort of exhibit like this where they've done like a horror themed exhibit in any nature?
Since I focused on natural history, I've seen things on poisons that are really popular at Halloween, or venom, or creepy animals, but not this cool like movie prop history. This is really neat.
Yeah.
Oh, I feel like I've seen this before, but I don't remember where.
Okay.
So or maybe I've just heard of this exact museum. I don't remember how long they've said it's been around.
Yeah, I think the museum is a little older. I believe the end of the article talks about it's been around since 1983.
Okay, yeah, so that's probably why I've seen it or have heard of it.
Okay.
To me, this is a technology museum. It's showing off the technology that we've used to create false impressions on the screen or wherever, which is really, really cool. Like, I guess, though, if you're going to draw the line between science and technology, science is figuring out how pre-existing things work sometimes, whereas technology is more creating awesome new things that work in fun ways.
Right,
like
from science.
The Dracula tooth I thought was really interesting, where he actually had a squirt bottle of blood in his mouth, and he'd press his palate correctly, and it would cause the blood to run down the tooth.
Yeah, movie props are so cool. Like when I learned how they actually work. I remember in theater class we watched the Broadway recording of Sweeney Todd, which if you haven't seen that musical, it is very good. It's also a horror musical. Basically, the premise is this guy comes back to London after being exiled, trying to save his daughter who is under... his daughter like is in some weird relationship with this older guy, and it's very gross and disgusting. But anyway, he opens a barbershop above a bakery. What ends up happening is that he, in teaming up with the baker, basically kills his victims, and then they use the bodies to make meat for their meat pies. I don't remember why they end up doing this. I think it's just to save money or something. Oh no, he has to get rid of a body, and then like eventually they just start doing this as like a scheme. I don't. It's been a few years since I've seen Sweeney Todd, so forgive me if I'm botching details. But the point of this is when he kills them, like because back in the day when they would give people shaves and stuff, they had like a really big razor, and the idea is he would like slit the throat, and they dump the body below into the bakery, and then they process the body and all that. Anyway, but the blade I learned about basically when they slit the throat is like it was basically my theater teacher described it as like there's like a compartment that you press a button on the knife, and like it's almost like squirting toothpaste. So you just kind of like squirt the toothpaste red blood mixture on their neck, and the person gives the reaction of I'm being murdered right now. I thought that was really cool. I was like, I like learning about those little like cool techie theater movie things. So that was my thought when I was reading this. I was like, oh, cool background stuff.
Yeah, there's a YouTube channel I'm going to plug. I'm not affiliated with them. It's just fun. It's called VFX Artists React, and they do some of these horror films and some of the old ones, too. Mm-hmm. And how they manage to do these things, yeah, it's amazing. It's really cool.
Yeah, practical effects are just so interesting to me. Like, when I hear about that stuff, I'm just like, I wonder who designed this? How long did it take? Like, did you go through multiple iterations of this? I don't know. I really like it.
Yeah, when I look at CGI nowadays, I'm always like, how did they do that? But yeah, back before there was CGI, it's even more so sometimes like, how did they do that?
Yeah. All right. Any last thoughts on museum stuff before we hop to topic of the show?
No, I just wish this was in the States so
I
could
know.
go see it.
The United Kingdom has all this cool stuff. And the thing for the topic of the show I'm going to bring up in a little bit is also in Europe. It's not here. Why can't it be in the United States? But alas. All right, we'll be right back with the topic of the show. Don't go anywhere.
Hello, dear Tritons. Happy Halloween. I hope you're having the most supernatural day today.
Happy Halloween from UMSO Radio. Thanks for tuning in, foolish mortals.
All right, and we're back. And now it's time for topic of the show. So in honor of the Halloween episode, I decided we're going to do a topic of the show all about fear. So fear is a natural human response. It's something that we have, in our mortal existence, like, love and compassion and hate and all of those other emotions that we have, happiness, sadness, etc. But Halloween, particularly the sort of month of October that encompasses Halloween, is all sort of dedicated to and celebrating fear and this emotion that we have that's kind of uncomfortable and not really, I would say, a fun feeling, but still one that's kind of part of the human existence. So I kind of thought I'd kick off the conversation with the fear topic about how do you guys like being scared? Do you like being scared? What's your kind of relationship with fear and this month of Halloween?
I hate being scared. I was never a fan of horror movies growing up. When there's a big wave in the ocean, it is not my cup of tea. I have nightmares about giant waves in the ocean. I had nightmares growing up. I've never appreciated being scared, at least not in the moment. Sometimes after it's done, it's like, oh, that other thing I was worried about seems so much less severe now. But for the most part, I'm not a fan of it.
Okay.
I was more of an adrenaline junkie when I was younger, and the older I get, the less I appreciate this sort of sweet spot of good fear.
Mm-hmm.
So,
is adrenaline junkie, is that more about like feeling the high of fear, like when like, oh, I watched this horror movie and I'm so like on edge, or is that like when I go do like high adventure stuff, like I went skydiving, like is that like the same vein?
I think it's pretty physiologically similar because your body and your brain, your central nervous system is like, don't jump out of the plane.
Right.
And then you do, but it's relatively safe.
Yeah, assuming the parachute works.
Yeah. I think that's similar.
Okay. Because, I've heard that term before, and I'm just like, I feel like I like doing high adventure stuff. I don't think I have the nerve to go skydiving. But, for me personally, fear is, I feel like I'm getting a little more tolerant of it and maybe enjoying it a little more as I'm getting older. As a kid, I absolutely hated it. Like, pretty much so many things would scare me. I remember, I used to be afraid of skeletons when I was a kid. So, quick story time from Jeremy's childhood. In music class, it was Miss Trance class in Falmouth Elementary School in Fredericksburg, Virginia. I think this would have been like the early 2000s, second or third grade. Anyway, it was Halloween month in music class, and we listened to this song, which I've tried to find many times in the coming decades since I had that experience, where this woman basically is walking around her house and her skin is slowly falling off. And I don't remember the name of the song, but basically it has this like these children giving like this ooh, like in between like the main lyrics of the song, and she's walking around and the skin slowly falling off. And at the end of the song, she basically finds a mirror and then she screams, like blood curdling scream, because she's a skeleton in the mirror. That song absolutely terrified me. I had nightmares. Aww. My parents had to pull me out of music class for like the rest of the Halloween unit until Thanksgiving, because like I would wake up crying and like very upset, and like I just couldn't. I was like, yeah, that sense of dread I remember hating when I was a kid. And that's the thing I never really liked about horror, is like that after feeling of like, I just feel like gross and like scared that something's out there, the monster, the murderer, the whatever.
Yeah.
The spirit, whatever. I always disliked that. I kind of do like a little bit of the adrenaline, like, oh, like it's exciting, but I don't like the after effect. Some people really go for that dread feeling though, like for their, horror connoisseurs, they really like that feeling of misery after horror movie media.
Yeah, horror movies are not my thing. How about you, Webster?
Nope. We used to watch them in my friend's basement, which was already a creepy enough place, and then we'd have to sleep down in that basement, and I was just like, Jason is totally going to walk into this room right now. It was not fun.
I find I have to, for horror movies, go to like my theater expertise area, like with the Sweeney Todd knife thing. Being like, oh, I wonder how when they sawed that guy's arm off, okay, so they had to make a prosthetic arm, they had to do fake blood, and like my mind's going to like the technical like background theater side, like, okay, that's cool how they did that, just to kind of step away from the horror and like it's so real and gross, versus like, oh, like let's think about this, from a production standpoint. So that's always what I do. And I also relentlessly crack sarcastic jokes when we watch horror movies, which is like a defense mechanism. So when my friend and I watch horror movies, or he makes me watch horror movies, like we did like a Halloween marathon like 2 years ago. I think it was during COVID when we couldn't really go out and do much stuff still. I was like constantly cracking jokes. I'm like, I'm not gonna be able to handle this if I don't. So that's kind of like my personal thing.
I suppose my personal experience with fear is I remember being like 2.5, 3 years old, and I needed a blood test for something and kind of freaked out about it. And a bunch of nurses held me down to get this blood test. And after that, I developed a needle phobia for specifically like doctors and hypodermic needles. Like tattoos, fine. Ear piercing, okay. But if it's like an IV or a blood test or a vaccine, it's taken years and years and years for me to be able to do that without hyperventilating. So that's my fear experience is developing a phobia.
Yeah, phobias are no fun.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever developed. I actually briefly had a spider phobia.
Oh.
Okay.
Like I like spiders, but at the same time I briefly had a phobia of them, where anytime I'd see the smallest spider on the wall, I would completely freak out.
I feel like we're now just like, this is turning into therapy. Like, what's your childhood trauma that led to some sort of weird fear?
Be like that old show Frasier.
Oh,
I'm Jeremy and I'm listening.
Yes. I will say though, and somewhat becoming a little bit more tolerable of fear. I don't necessarily go out of my way to watch horror movies, like newer ones. I have watched some older ones, like I have seen like The Shining and like the original Psycho from the 60s, and those have actually been very good. I have usually have to take little breaks though in between like segments, but what I do actually kind of like when horror bleeds into other things like noir and like murder mystery or like sci-fi. So I think those things kind of work pretty well, like peanut butter and chocolate levels, where it's not like crazy scary, but it kind of adds to the sci-fi element or, the noir murder mystery element that I do like. So I do kind of like when those genres blend a little bit.
Yeah, like Jurassic Park or Deep Blue Sea or The Meg. Love it. Love campy monster movies.
Oh,
but
camp. I'm all about the camp.
The minute you get me to something like Cloverfield, though,
yeah,
that freaks me out.
You don't enjoy the shaky camera?
No, and the weird offspring of the big monster running around and nobody can stop them. And if you get bitten, you're infected. I'm like, that's too much. That's not campy. That's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, then there's also when you go from horror into like deep psycho thriller. Those can get really interesting again, though.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
What Lies Beneath or The Others. These are really artistic movies where there is a horror element, but horror is not the ultimate focus.
Yeah, thriller is always fun because there's an element of suspense to it, kind of like the adrenaline junkie thing we were talking about. Like, you don't know what's going to happen, but it's not like scary. It's just like suspenseful, and that's like enticing. It's like a carrot on a stick because you want to watch that next episode or keep watching the movie so you figure out what happens. And thriller can bleed into horror, but there's like also political thriller and psychological thriller. So there's a lot of kind of genres there, which I also really like. So again, it's like it borrows from horror, but it's not like full blown horror.
Get it? I get it.
So.
Becky, are there any, I figure this would be a question for you, are there any hormones other than adrenaline that play into our emotions of fear?
I don't know off the top of my head, because adrenaline's the big one. Long-term chronic stressors is going to be things like cortisol. I imagine that dopamine has got to be involved somehow. So, but beyond that, I'm not sure. I haven't read enough about it. I've had straight adrenaline before for like an allergic reaction, like epinephrine, and that's really unpleasant. That does not make you feel like you have a nice natural high from skydiving or watching a scary movie. So I imagine there have to be other neurotransmitters that are involved.
Interesting. All right, I have here, this is not like a quiz like I usually do, but I pulled up the top 10 most common fears, like phobias, fears, those kind of things. Do you want to take a guess at what some of them might be?
Spiders.
The dark?
Let's see. Is there one? It's not on here, so I guess no.
Disappointing. I like that one. Well, I don't
Death?
like that one.
Let's see. No,
No,
not
death is
either.
no.
Snakes?
Snakes is one. Yep, snakes is another one.
Snakes, spiders, heights.
Heights is another.
Enclosed spaces?
Yep, claustrophobia.
Okay.
How many more are there?
I think there's
One
like
more.
6 more.
Oh.
I said there's 10. So.
Needles.
Needles, yep.
Yeah, I'm running out. Drowning.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Is drowning on here? Drowning is not on here.
Okay.
But I can tell you the other ones.
Okay.
All right, so you guys got spiders and snakes and heights. Fear of flying is apparently one. It's called aerophobia, which that kind of seems like the same thing as heights. But I guess if like you're worried with the plane crashing, maybe that's a different kind of phobia of sorts. Cynophobia, apparently a fear of dogs. Didn't think that was...
Oh, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, especially little kids.
Yeah, kids are very good at getting themselves bitten, and
That's
they're
true.
right at dog height, so they often get bit in the face. Yeah, I can see that.
Actually, now that I think about it, I did have dog fear for a little while because I got attacked by a dog when I was like 16. Yeah. So I was like kind of, not anti-dog, but like, oh, dogs are very scary because it's the thing of like, you don't go just pet any dog now. It's like you have to ask that owner, like, is your dog friendly? In that case, the dog was not friendly.
I almost got attacked by a German Shepherd on the loose when I was cycling one time. That was not fun.
Jeez. Let's see. Astrophobia, which is intense fear of thunder and lightning, so storms. Fear of injections, which Becky got, / needles. Social phobia, so fear of social interactions, which that kind of falls into like the social anxiety kind of category there. Agoraphobia, so intense places that are difficult to escape, which is kind of the same idea as claustrophobia. And then mysophobia, which is basically like germophobia, so fear of germs, dirt, and other contaminants. A lot of these I did not know the actual word for, so.
A lot of Latin in there.
Yeah, a lot of Latin.
I was thinking about this because we keep talking, fear of spiders keeps coming up, and I researched tarantulas, and that behavior work, part of it is studying fear in the spider. So how do we measure if spiders themselves are afraid? Mm-hmm. So it gets a little meta. And what I do is I measure their heart rates. And I have one spider, we call him the professor. He's so good. And his heart rate started when we started doing the experiments in the 40 beat per minute range, and now it's down to 16. He knows what's happening. He's cool as a cucumber. Okay. So it looks like heart rate might be a good proxy for measuring anxiety in spiders. Okay.
And remember, what do you do for the measuring fear? You stick the probe like on the underside, or?
Yeah, so their heart actually runs along the top of their back. Okay. On their abdomen. So we have a little Doppler probe, so it's the same thing you would use to measure fetal heart rate in a pregnant person, except we use a much higher frequency probe. You put a little gel on their back, you put the probe on, and if their heart is beating, you can hear it. It seems like they drop their heart rate. So in mammals, we know there's a phenomenon called alarm bradycardia. If any of you out there have vasovagal syncope, you know what this is. So your heart rate when you're first startled drops and your blood pressure drops. And that's why some people feel faint once sometimes they see blood or other things like that. So I think the tarantulas just do that when they're initially startled. So you actually have to get them calm enough for that heart rate to come back as you're measuring. So, yeah, probably more than you needed.
Cool. Well, speaking of research, so I want to pull this up, as I told you both in the run of show. So there is, in fact, a lab that studies fear. This is in, I believe the name of the university is Our House University. It's like ARHAUS. It's in Denmark. Anyway, it's a recreational fear lab, and what the lab actually does is study sort of this connection between where is fear heightened and where is fun heightened, and kind of where is that sort of sweet spot for fear, because unlike us, many people out there are kind of fear junkies. They do like going out and seeking these, fear adventures, whether that's, a horror movie, a haunted house, I guess going to like a creepy, site like a cemetery or something like that, kind of get their fix there. But this kind of lab kind of studies that. And basically what they do is, I watched the video earlier, and they basically put VR headsets on people, and they have them play a game. And they kind of introduce different elements, whether it's elements in the game that evoke fear, or they can have, extra things outside of the VR game come in and sort of, disturb them or mess with them. In one example they showed, there was this girl with this VR headset, and then there was this guy with like a bloody pig mask holding a chainsaw, like right outside the person wearing the VR headset. So they didn't know they were there, but I guess at some point they're going to realize that there's like a monster standing right next to them as part of the experiment, which I thought was really funny. It was a good part of the video. But they do a lot of cool stuff. They basically measure like skin perspiration, they measure heart rate, they measure... what's the other thing they measure I'm blanking on?
Maybe respiration?
Respiration, yeah, thank you. That was the other one. And kind of see, where is there too much fear? What's that kind of cusp or threshold for everyone where it's like fun, but then it's too much? So I thought that was kind of cool. This is another one of those things where I saw this and I was like, man, I would like to work in this lab for like a week. That just seems like it would be a lot of fun. I'm sure it's a lot of like computer simulation and running things, and there is probably a lot more work than the video suggests. But it just seems really cool, like being able to like do that and like have like research participants come in and be like, all right, you're gonna wear this VR headset and we're gonna test, where's your enjoyment and where's your fear and all that. So I thought that was super cool. Again, I wish we had something like that in the States.
Yeah, I didn't realize it wasn't in the States actually while I was looking through the website. So
yeah, it's in Denmark. But to my knowledge, there's no one else that quite does anything like this. But I definitely will keep an eye out for that. Would either of you guys try something like this? Like if you were a research subject, like if you want to find that sweet spot?
Yeah, I think so. That feels a little more comfortable to me than, say, a haunted house where it's not something real jumping out at me.
Yeah, I'd be curious. But also at the same time, I'd know once I were in the experiment, it might not accurately find this sweet spot, given that I would know that I was part of the experiment. So I'd naturally be tuning down my fear response.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. So you'd be like, I don't want to show them I'm as afraid as I normally am, or just like you're a test subject, so that influences.
Yeah, exactly. I knew I would know I was being a test subject, so I would just intuit, okay, like nothing's real.
Going back to that quantum collapse.
That's the trouble with human subjects research.
Yep, we have our biases and our so on and so forth. I guess another good question to ask is it, do you think it's good to face your fears? Do you think it's some out of fear is healthy? Do you think that sort of general sense of fear is okay? Or where do you think that sweet spot is?
I think me working on the needle phobia has been really important because I need vaccines. I need blood tests to stay healthy. So in that case, working on it was really helpful. And for me, it was as simple as getting anti-anxiety medication when I needed one of those procedures. And that tamped down my fight or flight response. And the more I was able to have these procedures done without that physiological response, it started to break up the relationship that my brain had made between the fearful situation and all those emotions and the needles. That relationship was gone. The medication stopped it. So now I definitely get nervous, but I don't hyperventilate. I don't need to take medication anymore. And that's been super helpful, but also kind of tough because every time you go to a new doctor and you request anxiety medication, those are often benzodiazepines. They're controlled substances. So you have to convince them like, no, I only need one for a procedure. I'm not a drug seeker. So it was difficult, but yeah, I say in some cases you got to face that fear.
Okay. How about you, Webster?
Let's see. Well, I wanted to mention in response to something Becky said right now about have either of you ever noticed that allergy medication tunes down your fear or your fight or flight response?
Do you mean like Benadryl or Claritin?
I mean like Benadryl.
So that's interesting because that's an anticholinergic. So I wonder what the cholinergic system might be doing. But sound plausible is what I think.
Okay.
I've had bad luck with allergy meds, and either it doesn't work, or in some cases it actually like makes the allergies worse. So like I have like nasal spray I used to use, and it was really helpful for like 2 years, and then like it backfires and now makes the allergies like hyper, I guess, active. So like it's even worse. So now I can't use that. So I don't really know where to go from here with allergy medication, but it seems like in general my allergies are a little bit less bad than they have been in previous years. So I'm not really sure what's going on with my body and immune system with all that. But I can't really answer your question because of that, Webster, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it's entirely possible.
Okay.
But what do you think? Should people face their fears?
Oh, should they?
Yeah, I was going to say, back to the question in hand.
I mean, yeah, it depends on what the fear is. If facing the fear is a necessary part of getting a vaccine, doing something that everybody should do, then absolutely face your fear. If your fear is of skydiving, I don't think you are at all obligated to jump out of a plane.
That seems fair. An entirely reasonable response.
Yeah, I know there's kind of the adage of like, you should do things that make you afraid. I think that's up to a point. I think things that will help your sort of personal growth or like professional development and stuff, like that's good for, engaging in those fears of like what will happen or social anxiety or those kind of things. I think there are also very logical responses with, as we talked about, the fight or flight response, like skydiving, like that's very scary. You're jumping out of a plane going towards the ground, or there's a meme I've seen in previous years going around that's like someone writes like, what's the fear of chainsaws called, and the top response is like what's the top response? It's like logic, because it's like of course that
makes sense. Yeah.
So yeah, I thought that was funny. But yeah, I think in small ways it's good to face your fears. I think larger fears, again, like I mentioned, like skydiving or like high adventure stuff, like that's kind of a natural response. Phobias are kind of a weird spot because depending on what the phobia is, it may be good or not good. Because there is exposure therapy as a way to address that, right?
Yeah, and it totally messes up all my literature searches for tarantulas and fear.
Okay.
Because all I get are papers about spider phobias in humans.
Okay.
Anyway, complaint, scientist problems.
But exposure therapy does work?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a couple in psychology. For exposure therapy, like the kind and good way to do it is, all right, if you're afraid of spiders, the first thing I want you to do is think about spiders. Picture them in your mind. Mm-hmm. And we're going to do that until you can do that without a big physiological response. And then maybe I'll bring a real picture of a spider. And then maybe we'll have a plastic spider. And you like slowly work your way up. The person getting comfortable at each level, they're not getting these huge physiological responses until you get a real spider. The other thing you can do, which is very unethical, and this shows up even in dog, horse training, stuff like that, but in humans is called flooding. So basically, we're going to lock you in a closet with a spider until you stop screaming.
Oh.
And you figure it out on your own.
Wow.
And if you do flooding improperly, you can make a phobia much, much, much worse.
Wow. Didn't know that.
Yeah, exposure therapy, good. Flooding, bad.
Okay. Good to know. All right, on that note, I think we're going to wrap up the topic of the show. All right, so we will be right back with Outside of Science. Don't go anywhere.
Boo! Did I scare you? Happy Halloween, UMSU Titans. Thank you for tuning to UMSU Radio.
Fire bad. UMSU Radio good. Happy Halloween.
Okay, and we're back with Outside of Science. So as usual, this is our off-the-cuff segment where we talk about things, you guessed it, outside of science to prove that we're not robots that do science all the time. So last week was our sustainability episode, and we had a really awesome conversation about sustainability, but we ran out of time for Outside of Science. So we've had 2 weeks to do stuff. Would anyone like to go first about stuff they have done outside of science?
Well, I know there was a barbecue that we went to a couple weeks ago that was very nice, a Biology Graduate Students Association. I just didn't see Becky there. I kept looking for her.
Because I was camping.
Where'd you go camping?
I was in One Horse Gap Lake in southern Illinois. We took the Jeep out and took a little Jeep trail. Camped near the lake. According to Forest Service regulations, you have to be a certain distance from the water source. And it was beautiful. Fall colors, everything. It was great.
Nice. Did you guys go hiking or just like hang out by the fire? Or?
Both. We hiked the loop around the lake, hung out by the fire. It's a popular equestrian trail, so a big group of equestrians, so horseback riders, hung out with us at camp for an hour or so. I had to put one of the dogs in the car because he wanted to bark at the horses. And it was fine. So how was this barbecue? How was this party that I missed?
It was very small. So as Webster alluded to, the Biology Graduate Student Association, which is one of the clubs on campus, has kind of a welcome event. I think just because of the timing in the semester and people being busy and stuff. It's only 5 people there. So it was at Ray's house, Ray was on the AI show a couple weeks ago. And we just hung out. We had hot dogs, chips, barbecue food. And then he lives right near Tower Grove Park. So we went to Tower Grove Park and played a couple yard games like Viking bowling and bocce ball.
Oh, I missed the end.
Oh yeah, because you left early, so
yeah.
You didn't indulge in the yard games.
What is Viking bowling?
So Viking bowling is this game where you basically have like a bunch of like numbered pegs, and the idea is you put all the pegs up in the grass, kind of like you would like regular bowling with all the pins at the end of the lane. And with one of the like the throwing peg, you throw and try and knock all the pegs over. And the way the scoring works is that, let's say I knock over 2 pins numbered 1 and 9. So if I just knocked over the 1, it would be 1 point. If I knocked over the 9 pin, it'd be 9 points. But if I knock over both pins, it'd be 2 points. So the idea is you want to knock over 1 pin at a time that has a lot of points. But the more you knock over, the less points you get because you get the number of points based on the number of pins you hit.
Okay. So
if I hit like a group of 5 of them and there was like, a 10, a 9, an 8, and a 7, and a 1, I'd only get 5 points because I knocked over 5 pins and not just one of them. So the idea is you got to be kind of like precise and like hit individual things over, but not try and knock as many things over. However, at the start of the game, when all the pins are together, you have to knock them all over and kind of get them to spread out because they'll like move away and then you kind of stand them back up and they'll all be scattered now. And the idea is I think you played at some certain amount, like we played at like 40. I won the first game and then Garrett won the second game.
Cool.
And then we played bocce ball. Garrett and I teamed up and then we just barely beat George and Ray at bocce ball. So we won both times.
So how's your dancing going?
Oh, it's going. I mean, we had coaching a couple weeks ago, which was very difficult. It was amazing how little progress we made during the coaching in the sense of how far we made it through our own choreography. But it was amazing how much detail he packed into just the simple motion of doing a turn or the simple motion of the hip motions that we were doing before versus what we were supposed to be doing.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's ballroom dance is a much more detailed sport than even we were treating it as being. So that was pretty cool. And yeah, it's going well. We have another class today at 2. We're bringing back in what we learned from the coaching into our choreography, which is really fun. We're also learning some new choreography, swing this time.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
And were you signed up for your first competition yet?
Oh, no, that's not until next summer at the earliest.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So we have to work up to that consistently.
It should be fun when it finally comes around. I don't know. I get moody when this weather gets cold, so the last thing I want to think about is dancing, even though it is today.
Aw.
Yeah, that wake up.
Yeah, we're cruising into seasonal affective disorder season.
Yeah, I was not a fan. So for those of you who are listening who are not in St. Louis or the Midwest, on Friday of last week, it was 82 degrees, which was amazing and very unusual for this time of year. And then on Saturday, it was 42 degrees. So we kind of half the temperature in about 12 hours. So that was a brutal wake up on Saturday morning.
Yeah, we got enlisted, Ray and I, to go save a host from last season, Sebastian. He's currently doing research in Ecuador, and he needed us to go save some of his plants and put them inside. So
yes,
we did that this weekend.
One other thing I did from this past weekend, so also the BGSA went to the annual trunk or treat, which if those of you are on UMSL and you are part of an organization, all the organizations come in the parking lot around the MSC and basically give out candy to kids during Saturday morning for like a 2-hour window. It was a lot of fun. Everyone kind of brings their car and decorates it a certain theme, and then all the kids come by for 2 hours and we give them candy. It's kind of like trick-or-treating, but instead of going house to house, you go car to car. So the Biology Graduate Student Association basically grabbed a bunch of bones because we have this giant bone collection, made kind of like a spooky bone trunk, which is a lot of fun. And we basically made the kids come up and like grab the candy instead of giving it to them. So they had to face the bones. They had to face their fears to get their candy.
Did this have roots in your skeleton fear?
No, the skeleton fear has been long gone. I actually got rid of that weirdly from learning about biology and learning that we all like have skeletons inside of us.
Because you teach anatomy now. But did you draw on that as inspiration?
No, someone else gave that for an idea because I didn't have the idea for the trunk. Someone else did. They're like, we should do bones. I'm like, that sounds like a great idea. Let's do it. All right. So yeah, that's what I've been doing. Oh, and then I went to a Halloween party on Sunday because John Bender had his Halloween party, which Becky was also at.
Yep. Oh, okay. I was going to go, but that rain and the distance of the drive, I was like, am I going to be able to drive home safely after having a drink or two?
It did suck driving there, I will admit. It was better on the way back.
I was a designated driver, so I did not drink. But it was still fun. For that, I mean, I won't like give out his address or anything, but Google Maps, all of us had some issues. It tried to get us to turn off into some bushes to get to this house as opposed to the driveway.
Yes.
So that was interesting.
Yes.
Jeremy and I played some rounds of Mario Kart. Turns out I'm old and I'm good at the Nintendo 64 version, but I got a little trouble with the Switch.
Yeah. It was fun because all the grad students were in the kitchen, and Becky was like, we should go hang out with the zoo people because a bunch of people from the St. Louis Zoo were there who John knows through his PhD work and everything. And I was like, yeah, at some point. And then we all just migrated to the living room playing Mario Kart. So we never actually interacted with the zoo people. They're always in the dining room playing board games. We were either in the kitchen eating food or in the living room playing Mario Kart.
You could say, because they were mostly ornithology, so bird people, that we all split to our own flocks.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
No, they were all very nice. I don't know why we did that. It was a weird social phenomenon.
Yes. Birds of a feather, I guess. You got to stick together. Okay. I think with that, that's going to end our Halloween episode. So thank you so much for listening this week to That Science and Nature Show. Thank you, of course, to Webster and Becky for being awesome co-hosts as usual. And we hope that you all have a safe, fun, happy Halloween. Until next week, we'll be back at 9 a.m. on Tuesdays, as we always are. You've been listening to That Science and Nature Show. My name is Jeremy Howard, and we are out.